So in the last video, we covered how to capture these nodes, these HTML elements, using the DOM, and then we manipulated the styling of one of these guys. I think it was this guy right here, span class details ID username. We captured this guy, and then we turned him some sort of color, like red or purple, or it doesn't matter. We turned him some sort of color. And so we left off the last video with a question, that if we captured one of these nodes, and all of these guys are up for grabs, like all of these nodes are in play, you can capture any of these HTML elements you want. So when we capture a node, are we simply limited to or manipulating the styling of that node, the text color, text weight, font? And the answer is no. Once we capture one of these nodes, all of the properties of that node are available to us, including the data contained within the node. And so this video is going to take a look at how, when the user hits submit, how do we go about capturing the nodes and capturing the data within the nodes, which is going to be their values, the information they've submitted. How do we do that with the JavaScript? But in order to understand that, we need to understand first the basic data flow of a form. Where's the information going? What does the information look like? So let's take a look at this. So this code on the left generates this page on the right. And so I've written a function here called handle form submit. When the form submits, it's going to run this function. All this function does is capture this guy using the DOM, and it turns him green. Now pay attention to the color of username. Now see how it's flashing like that? What my code says to do is to turn this guy green, not to turn him green then turn him blue. So why isn't this guy staying blue? Well, again, we have to understand the data flow. What's happening with the form once the user clicks the submit button? What does the data look like? Where is it going? So that brings us to the form tag. We discussed the onsubmit attribute in the last video. Again, if you haven't seen the last video, there's a link in the description. And so onsubmit tells the form basically what to do. Action, these two new attributes, method and action. Action tells the form what to do or where to go after the form's been submitted, and method tells the form how to send the data. Let's zoom in on the method attribute. Let's unpack that. What is the method attribute? Well, there are two main methods for submitting form data, and they come from the HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, basically a set of rules that dictate how the internet should be run. And these two main methods for transporting data from a form are get and post. Now the default method is is get. So if we don't add a method here, the form assumes get. Now how does get send your data to wherever it needs to go? Well, get creates these key value pairs. And so the value is the data the user enters in the input field. Now it creates the key from the name assigned to that input field. And so get creates these key value pairs, and it sends this data through the URL of your browser. Now what does that look like? Well, this is DuckDuckGo. Now, how do we know for a fact that they're using the get method and not the post method to send data? So their programmer created a text box just like our text box. It's a form. It's part of a form. Now let's see if we can prove that they're using the get method. Let's search for something like bread. Now pay attention to the URL. Now, the get method sends these key value pairs as a query string in the URL. This is the query string. Anything after this question mark, that's the query string. And these are the key value pairs. Q is equal to bread. Normally you have key colon value, but of course you can't use colon here because colon is reserved for the HTTPS : / So it's key, value, and these key value pairs are separated by ampersands. You can't use commas in URLs. And so we know for a fact they're using the get method, and we know for a fact that their programmer named this input box Q. That's the key here. Let's just prove that. So right click, we can do an inspect on this element. And there we go. So their input type text box is named Q, and they're using the get method. Now the get method's great for bookmarking things. And so if you copy this URL and you paste it and you go to this site, you're going to get this exact same page. Well, not exact. It's a search engine, so you get updated results. But it's great for bookmarking things. What get is not great for is, what if this input field wasn't a search field, but it was like a PIN number field or a password field? Anyone snooping in on the user's screen, they could see their password in plain text. And so for that reason, we don't use the get method to send sensitive data. We use the post method. Now, what is the post method? Well, the post method uses the exact same key value pairs, but instead of sending it as or through the URL of the browser, it sends it through the request object of your browser. Now, what is the request? What does that mean? What is the request object? Well, when you go to a site, your browser sends a request object from your computer to the site you're visiting. And this request object tells that site what you're doing there and who you are. Now, in this request object, there's a bunch of properties. Don't quote me on this, but I think there's one called with cred. It's like with credentials. I'm just going to say with cred. It's a Boolean, true or false. When you say true, you have to actually provide the credentials. I think it's like basic auth. Again, don't quote me on this. Now it's going to be like a 64-bit encoded, I think it's a user password key value pair. Let's move this over just a bit. Key value pair. Anyways, all this just to say that in this request object, there's a property called body. And within that property, it's an object itself. Within that body, there is another property called, I don't know what it's called. I think it's form data. Again, don't quote me on this. But in that body, there's a form data property, also an object. And this is where post sends the key value pairs. So whereas get sends your key value pairs in plain sight, post sends your key value pairs in the body of the request object, just like that. So what does this have to do with our username color not staying green? Let's go back to this guy right here. Now, we went over the onsubmit in the last video. It tells the form what to do after you submit. You can run a function, do whatever you want. We just went over the method attribute. It tells the form how to submit the data. Again, if you don't put anything, it's get, but let's just explicitly say get. Now, this action attribute, it tells the form what to do after the data is submitted. If you leave it blank, the default behavior is a refresh. This is why it's not staying green, because the default color of this guy is blue. So it does turn green. This function does run, but it refreshes the page. The page comes back fresh, and the default color is blue. Now, there are a couple of ways to interrupt this behavior. I'm going to show you this one here, and maybe we'll get to the next one. So we're going to add an anchor tag. All an anchor tag is a redirect from your page to your same page. And well, let me just show you. So let's say we had to scroll on our page. Currently, there's no scroll because there's not enough content on the page. Let's artificially inflate the page here. So let's just do that. Now we have to scroll through the page. All this anchor tag does, again, if you don't put it takes an ID. So if you don't put any sort of specific ID, so a string under after the hashtag, the default anchor is the top of the page. So when you hit submit, it's going to redirect, instead of refreshing, to the top of the page of the same page. Now if we add an ID here, if we added, let's say, this user pin num, we added it after the hashtag, again, it would not refresh, it just redirect, but it redirect us down to the user pin num. So currently we have it redirecting to the top. So watch what happens when we have the anchor tag that says do not refresh, redirect to the same page. Watch what happens to username now. So that's all saved. Now I submit, we get redirected, we get redirected to the top. Let's look at the color of username. Now, why is username blue and not green? It was supposed to be green because we didn't refresh, we redirected, right? Well, we did refresh. No matter what you do, the page will refresh if you're sending new data. So we sent new data, thus it refreshed, thus it gave us the default color blue. Now, if you send the same data, it doesn't trigger the refresh because it's not new data. So basically what we did was this. Let's say we had our page here. We had a page here called new. Now we sent new data submitted through our form. And so it refreshed the page. So we get a new version of our page. Let's just call it like new game plus, new plus. Now what happens if we send the exact same data? There's going to be no refresh. It just gets redirected. And so we get the exact same page, just we're anchored somewhere in the page. Now if we send new data from this guy, we get a new page, a new refresh. So we'd get new plus plus. So we just sent no data, and so it refreshed. If we send no data again, it won't trigger a refresh. It'll do a redirect. So watch what happens to the username color. And again, the anchor's at the top, so we anchor or redirect to the top, and we scroll down, and username is green. So that's what's happening. If we add new data, again, new data, new form, you can't avoid a refresh. So we do this, username should be blue. And blue. We enter the same data, which I think was 5, which is the same data. Doesn't trigger a refresh, triggers a redirect, and username is green. So that's why our username was going from green to blue, and it wasn't staying green. We have to understand the data flow, what's happening with the form once the user hits submit. Now let's clean up this code a bit. Now, all of that stuff I've been saying for the past, I don't know, I think it's been 10 minutes. The video's getting long, so I'm going to end it here. All of that stuff, it's not irrelevant. You need to know it, but you don't need to write any of this. All of this stuff is, you could say, redundant. When you actually program, none of this stuff you don't put in there. What we're here to do is we're here to use JavaScript. This uses HTML to accomplish this task. What we're going to do in the next video, it's supposed to be in this video, but this video is running long. I apologize. What we're going to do in the next video is we're going to use JavaScript to interrupt or intersect this process. So instead of using HTML to do all of this stuff, we're going to hijack this form with JavaScript. So we're going to explore, we're going to get into it, I promise, in the next video. How do we actually use JavaScript to capture data in a form once the user hits submit? So like always, if you see any value in this video, don't forget to give a like, share, a comment down below, thumbs up, whichever platform you're watching this one on. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And I will see you guys in the next one.